Welcome back, everyone. The JT Show, SuperTalk Mississippi. Gerard Gibert at the Neshoba County Fair, coming at you live, looking at the pavilion. And joining us now, our good friend, the Commissioner of the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, Sean Tindell. That clapping you hear in the background is Secretary of State Michael Watson, hamming it up over there.
When you got paws that big, it makes a sound that resonates throughout the whole fair.
Appreciate that, there's Mr. Secretary. You got a fan, Commissioner.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you get out of a ticket, by the way, Mr. Secretary.
He's getting an extra detail now.
There you go. All right. What do you think about this deal, Commissioners? It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It really is. You know, being somebody from the coast and growing up with the things that we do down there, when you come here for the first time, it's like you're stepping back in time.
I've noted that the cabins have gotten more sophisticated through the years, though they're a little different than they were. But a Mississippi tradition for a very long time, the giant house party they call it, and we were privy to see many speeches today from our elected leaders, lots of interesting messaging coming on. Saw a detail of our fabulous men and women of the Mississippi Highway Patrol. Always kind of makes me poke my chest out a little bit, a sense of pride. They're just such a fantastic unit, and I know you're proud of them. They're the best of the best.
They are 100%, and really, you know, I tell them all the time it's an honor to be the commissioner and be working with them on protecting Mississippi, and you know, really what they go through to become a trooper and then what they do when they get done deserves a lot of praise. And that's one thing that's great about this state. I mean, you got things like Neshoba County Fair that make it great, but to be in a state that appreciates its law enforcement and is a law enforcement-minded state makes it a great place to work and live, and I'm certainly proud to be a part of their team.
How are we doing as far as recruiting? We just recently had some classes that graduated, right?
We did. We Class 65 just graduated about a month ago, and then we put 45 new troopers out on the road. We're looking at doing another class next year and really trying to work with the legislature so that we can start doing an annual class so that we can maintain our numbers. We're allotted to have 650 highway patrolmen. I would like us to get that number back up over 600 for the first time in almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be a big push, as well as MBN. In 2006, 2007, we had about 170 MBN agents.
Wow.
Now we've got just under 90. And so, you know, some areas talk about defunding the police, and we're talking about refunding law enforcement here in Mississippi,
right,
getting back up to those levels.
Well, and we've had several of our audience that have texted in calling for higher pay for the members of our highway patrol and just law enforcement in general. Your thoughts about that? Are you in discussions with our legislators? Is there a possibility on that?
I have it, and you know, normally the Department of Public Safety will have a legislative agenda. Really, the only thing on my agenda this year is getting a pay raise for our troopers,
okay,
and our MBN agents, and the rest of the law enforcement we have. Right now, they're just under 40,000, and we're going to push to get that starting salary up to 50,000. And you know, when you look at other police departments in other states, I think in Texas they start them off at about 70 or 80,000.
Wow.
I got a post the other day from Alaska. Of course, it's Alaska, but
sure,
they're starting off around 90,000.
Good grief.
And so, you know, really we need to step up for our law enforcement here in Mississippi. I think it's in South Haven. The starting salary for deputies up there is 50,000.
Okay.
So we need to be competing with our local law enforcement too, and so to get that salary up would mean a lot to these folks and keep them.
Yeah.
You know, we have a lot of them that are retiring, a lot of them that are just leaving, going into other professions.
Yeah.
And in order to keep them, we need to get those salaries up for those veterans as well.
Absolutely. So you're aware there are stories from across the country. Crime is out of control, especially in these cities that have taken the approach of so-called defunding the police and to a great extent almost just denouncing the police, which is just incredible. Do you feel any of that here in Mississippi? Does that ever come up? And if so, how do you handle that?
Well, I don't think there's ever been a conscious effort, at least in most cities in Mississippi or even on the state level, to cut back on our law enforcement presence. I think there was a few things that happened. Primarily the recession that occurred in 07-08 caused cutbacks in all state government. So when there were vacancies, a lot of those positions just did not get filled in order to meet budget requirements.
Yeah.
And they've just never been filled back. So, and that's why it was 07, 08 that you saw the highest highway patrol membership that we had. You saw the most MDN agents, and then it tapered off, and it's time to build that back up. So I don't see that conscious effort to defund the police, but I think there has been a cutback in our enforcement, and it's time to rebuild that. And I think a direct correlation when you hear about the drug epidemic, the opioid crisis, and
fentanyl too now.
Fentanyl.
So, yeah.
That's where MBN and law enforcement steps up, and there is a great study. There's several of them out there that show when you enforce traffic laws, stop signs and speeding laws, that it cuts down on violent crimes because the citizens know that laws are being enforced.
Got to be careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a deterrent.
That's right.
And no question about it. But you got to have feet on the street to do that. And, I mean, some of the stuff that we're seeing across the country, I haven't seen in Mississippi, but it's just very disturbing where folks are just walking in stores and helping themselves and walking out. Police are waving at them. Can't do anything about it because of local restrictions on law enforcement efforts. I do have a concern that the federal government seems to be kind of getting more involved in that sort of stuff and how that might interfere with the way we run things at the state and local level. And certainly you guys are thinking about that and have some concerns as well. And if it comes down to it, I can just see us ended up in court, to fight the federal government to deal with this matter.
Well, and anytime you look at federal overreach, it's generally not been a good thing.
Yeah.
And so, and especially in a state like Mississippi where, and I go back to a year ago when we had a lot of protests, even in Mississippi, regarding law enforcement. And the men and women of the Mississippi Highway Patrol and the Bureau of Narcotics and our local sheriffs and police chiefs did an excellent job, and you didn't really hear of any problems in Mississippi because the law enforcement officers there that were monitoring those events not only protected the communities, but also protected the First Amendment rights of the protesters. Protesting them. And they did such an excellent job.
It's upside down, and it's but I saw yesterday, digressing a bit, the mayor of Seattle, Jenny Durkin is her name, that remember last year Summer of Love and all that stuff. She's now calling out. She's saying we can't continue like this. The crime is raging in the city of Seattle. It ain't the Summer of Love, and now she's calling for more funding, more resources to combat that. Maybe they're waking up a little bit.
Well, they need to, and then it goes back. If you allow, even on misdemeanors and stop signs and speeding tickets and those things, if you allow a culture of lawlessness to continue, even on the minor crimes, you're going to have bigger crimes.
Great point.
And those criminals are going to go on to do a life of crime. And so, it's a failed policy. It's a failed idea. And any time the Democrats start backtracking on something like that, I think we know that maybe it's the policy is flawed and we need to reconsider.
Well, I think the public opinion is driving them, and they say, this isn't very popular, even with our base and our constituents. Maybe we need to rethink this. But so with respect to our motorists on the highways, I always enjoy talking to Major Polis and occasionally Colonel Ginn on this, who are clearly, as are all of your officers, dedicated to keeping our roadways safe. How are we doing? How did we do on July 4th? We got the next big traveling weekend, Labor Day, coming up. How are we doing?
4th of July was pretty mild with all things considered on traffic fatalities. I don't have the exact numbers, but I know compared to years past, it wasn't. We didn't see as much as we have seen. And of course, we've made a big push in the city of Jackson. Highway Patrol has been on active patrols and a saturation detail there, and that's really done some good things. I don't know if you saw. Guy was one of the first people we stopped. It was a young man. He was 19 years old. Police went to pull him over, and he took off doing over 100 miles an hour. And finally, he stopped, and the trooper got out and talked to him and said, "Hey, why did you take off?" And he said, "Well, no one's ever chased me."
Oh my gosh. Well, I want to tell you, sorry to interrupt. I've noticed traveling that I-55 from where I live up in Ridgeland to the downtown, or even to where the split is there at 20. I've seen more in the last couple of weeks, officers, cruisers pulling over traffic violators, I think, that I have in the last 10 years, just in the last 2 weeks. So something's happening, and hopefully it's getting people to slow down, act right, and is serving as a deterrent to even worse crimes.
Well, absolutely. And I do want to applaud the troopers, and this is what I was about to say.
Yeah.
The one that pulled him over is a 19-year-old. He had never had a driver's license. He was still using a minor ID. And so they've actually reached back out to him, trying to help him get a driver's license.
Unbelievable.
You know, community.
Well, that's what you're there for.
That's
I think, and people miss that part of it. It's unfortunately they all only paint with a broad brush the entire law enforcement community with one or two bad apples. Sometimes just one or two bad incidents. So, Commissioner, always a pleasure having you on. Really appreciate it, sir.
Great to be here. Appreciate the opportunities.
Thank you. We'll be right back with more on the JT Show.